Thank you so much, Jeff, and everyone for showing up today. I know it's been a very busy literary weekend in San Francisco, so it's really nice to see people. I also want to say thanks to the Bernal Yoga curators. It's easy to be the person enjoying the reading on the bolster on the floor and stuff, but really appreciate all the behind-the-scenes work that you guys have done to keep it dynamic and interesting over time, so thanks. I'm going to be reading I've been writing linked short stories that I hope work together as a novel, and each story is told from a different point of view. And today's, the piece I'm going to read today is an excerpt of a piece from the main character's point of view, and his name is Clark, and he's an American GI in Iraq in the years 2007, and so far he hasn't seen any combat, so that's where we are. And of course I'm writing completely out of my element, so it's been an interesting adventure, I guess. It's called Night Vision. Clark and Lyons stood guard in the wide basement hallway they called the dungeon, a place where weapons had been stored even in Hussein's day. In the pitch black, Clark couldn't see much of anything except for the blue glow of the light Tibbs kept on his key ring, which was dimming as he and Ned disappeared further down the hallway. They'd had a few beers, courtesy of a source that Ned refused to divulge, just as he'd refused to explain what it was he was looking for in the armory. It was a Tuesday, past curfew. This was one of the many stupid things the guys did to unwind and forget the gore of the day, one of the many things they did to kill time. As Clark's eyes adjusted, he was able to make out the necklace outline of Lyons, who was rocking back and forth like a boxer in the ring just before the bell went off. Clark didn't like Lyons. The feeling was mutual. "You hear that?" Clark asked. "Rats. I think one just ran across my boot. I've been trying to stomp on their tails," Lyons said. "I can take about 2 more seconds of this." "Copy that." They stood in the dark a few more minutes until the armory door slammed shut, and they could hear Ned punching in the alarm code. He and Tibbs hurried toward Clark and Lyons with bulky contraptions in their uplifted hands, night vision goggles. "Follow me, men," Ned said, and once again Clark found himself following Ned without asking questions. Clark hadn't liked Ned much at first. There was something sloppy and overdone about him. The way he said cheers, knocking knuckles over any little piece of news. Ned was 33, the age of Christ, as he liked to say, and as far back as Fort Lewis, he'd acted like the ringleader, putting his hands on Clark's shoulders to let him know if he had questions about anything, from protocol to pussy, that he was the authority. From SoCal, Ned liked to sunbathe in his boxers in the little square of dirt outside of their dorm. He brushed the leather toes of his desert boots every night, roasted marshmallows with his lighter, and ate Vandy Camp's clam chowder, mailed to him by his mother, cold from the can. Ned shaved twice a day with an electric razor that he kept in a zipper bag, along with a canister of lip balm, a rubber-banded bundle of Q-tips, and a long strip of lubricated condoms. Over time, he'd grown on Clark. His hedonism and self-promotion was an unattainable bravado Clark admired. As improbable as Ned's stories had to be, Clark found himself drawn in by the accounts of 30-foot swells and week-long drunken orgies. They reminded Clark of his Uncle Frederick and the conversations he'd overheard as a boy at Shag Nasty's. All talk. Occasionally, through Ned's frantic eagerness, Clark could glimpse what he suspected was the real Ned, the Ned who Skyped his mother most Sundays, the Ned who was the first to include the new guy, the depressed guy, the ousted guy. Late at night, after the others had fallen asleep, Ned would turn off his act briefly, admitting to Clark how much he missed his girls, his wife's long legs, and the babysitter's cinnamon-flavored tongue, the way his oldest daughter stroked his eyebrows, and his youngest put her arms in the air saying, "Carry you." Then Ned might say something profound. "What is love anyway?" he once mused. but the desire to let someone know you. In exchange, Clark told Ned about his uncle's bad heart and his mother being queer and how angry she was with him for coming to the war, and once on a particularly maudlin night that he thought he had lost her forever. Through all of this, Ned never judged. In the dark with Ned, Clark even dared to admit that he too was beginning to need more, to want things he knew he shouldn't, to witness firsthand how the messes they cleaned up got there, to see the enemy eye to eye. Anything to drain the ache of adrenaline that had built up inside of him like a serious case of blue balls. With Ned, he found himself talking about anything and everyone that is, except Sylvie. Entering the women's quarters, Clark could smell the difference immediately. It was the intoxicating scent of shopping malls and dozens of different deodorants, soaps and lotions, floral and citrus, jergens and ivory, that suggested soft, smooth skin and reminded him of Sylvie. He thought of the way her clean, straight hair slipped from her ponytails. He thought of her skinny, childlike arms and the talcum powder that she patted under those arms. For months, he kept quiet about her, protecting her from this place and his horny bunkmates. Now he discovered that the same femininity he'd simultaneously yearned for and shielded had been here all along, just one flight of stairs above his own bed. The men left their boots in the stairwell, slipped on the goggles, and cautiously explored the central lounge area that funneled into a narrow hall containing 3 dorm rooms and a shower room. Tibbs whispered, "This is nice," and Ned nodded as if he already knew. Lyons lifted a stuffed frog, sniffed at it, and then tossed it back onto the chair. From here, Ned led them down the hall toward the room where Joelle slept. She was another of Ned's protégés, a plain girl from Lansing who more or less hated the other women and had been hanging out with Ned since before he and Clark became friends. Ned acted protective of Joelle, although she didn't seem to need it. The 4 guys huddled just inside the bedroom door to get their bearings. Seen through the night goggles, the room was murky green, as if submerged in lake water, reminding Clark of one of his mother's experimental films. A bunk bed lined each of the 3 walls, forming a U with trunks and gear pressed between them. Tucked into each of the bunks, the women's warm bodies glowed like the plastic figurines in a snow globe. Mary, a pudgy Filipina from a city near San Francisco that was mostly made up of graves, occupied the nearest bottom bunk. She slept on her side, her hair strewn over her face, her arms and legs sprawled widely under her thin sheet. One of her feet dangled off the mattress. Clark had once heard her speaking on the phone in a language he'd never heard before, but when he'd stopped to listen, she turned her back to him. Now, her delicate snore drew Clark deeper into the room. 2 electrical snaps in the old air circulation system sent Tibbs and Lyons out the door, deserting Clark and Ned. Clark held his breath. Mary let out a deep, satisfied sigh. Using the wall to steady himself, he followed Ned to the bunk furthest from the door. There on the bottom slept Joelle. A stomach sleeper, her legs were pressed together, her knees slightly bent beneath her, pushing her ass into the air. Her face was turned outward on her pillow. She wore a wife beater and a pair of workout shorts that said Spartans across the butt. Her sheets lay scrunched at her feet. Ned knelt down and peered into her sleeping face, and then, like the father that he was, he arranged the sheets and carefully pulled them up over her shoulders. Clark watched, stunned. What if she opened her eyes? What if she screamed? Later, after returning the gear, the 4 of them sat around and shared the last beer, saying nothing. Clark remained lost in the mossy glow of the women's slow breathing and the sugary smelling room. He kept hearing Mary sigh, not from the safe distance where he'd been standing, but as if her mouth were pressed against his ears. Lyons wrecked the moment by pulling out a tube of mascara from his pocket and announcing that he thought it was Claudia's. And then he pulled out Mary's tortoiseshell barrette and a postcard from Florida. Mementos, he called them, lighting them up on the table like a museum display. The way he handled them proved to Clark that the guy was depraved. That had been the first night, the magical night. Thanks.
Glori Simmons, everyone. So we're going to have Gene.